Recently, I enjoyed reading an interesting book written by playwright Sarah Ruhl called 100 Essays I Don't Have Time to Write. It is exactly what the title suggests, a collection of 100 essays. Sarah shares her struggle of juggling a career as a playwright while also caring for 3 young children. It is entertaining for theater lovers, but also for those who haven't stepped foot in a theater. Sarah's book had me searching for more answers in my own life than I usually do. Her 100 short essays each opened a new door in my mind, a door where creativity now freely flows through. Today, Sarah is here to talk to us about her new book. Hello, Sarah. It's great to have you here on the show. Hello, Haley. Thank you for inviting me. I would first like to congratulate you on such a great book. Thank you. Now, Sarah, we usually know you for your plays. Why a book this time? Well, originally I had just been writing essays as a way to keep myself thinking. After having 3 children, I wanted to make sure that I could still be creative. As a playwright, I had to make sure that my mind was staying fresh and open to anything. Eventually, the essays began to build up and I decided, why not try to make it to 100? Very interesting. Now, as a mother of 3 young children, it must be hard to find time to write. How did you manage 100 essays while caring for 3 kids? It definitely got difficult at times. As I warned the reader in essay number 1, I could lie to you and say that I intended to write something totalizing, something grand, but I confess that I had a more humble ambition, to preserve for myself, in rare private moments, some liberty of thought. I didn't intend to write a long novel. I wanted a collection of short pieces that left my readers thinking. Also, being around children all day and then writing plays at night, I was sometimes inspired by my children. I watch them play, and the creativity and innocence of it inspires my writing. Caring for 3 young children while writing is a blessing and at times a curse. A lot of your essays are focused on theater, and the rest are about being a mother. Do you think that someone who is not a mother and not a playwright can get something out of this book? I definitely think that this book isn't just for those whose lives revolve around the theater. Each essay leaves you with a question general enough to apply its answers to your own life, whether you are a playwright or a lawyer. For example, I'd like to read you essay number 20. I worry that choosing the essay form implies that I know something, because today, it is, mind you, an extremely hot day. I feel that I know next to nothing. Recently, I met a mathematician who described himself as the world's leading expert on absolute and total ignorance. Today, I stand with the mathematician, but the mathematician, while an expert in ignorance, also believed firmly and enthusiastically in the concept of progress. I'm not sure that I believe in progress, because I make theater, and theater, by its nature, does not believe in progress. We must constantly go back to go forward, and the theater cannot believe in absolute knowledge, because usually 2 or 3 characters are talking, and they usually believe 2 or 3 different things, making knowledge a relative proposition. But, increasingly, in the American theater, we are led to believe that plays are about knowing, or putting forward a thesis. Today, I stand humbly with the mathematician. I am not the world's leading expert on absolute and total ignorance, but the importance of knowing nothing is underrated. The last line, but the importance of knowing nothing is underrated, isn't talking about theater or being a mother. It is a sentence that can pose questions in anyone's mind. It makes people think about if they are the world's leading expert on absolute and total ignorance, and that is a question that can be important to someone in any aspect of life. On the other hand, I do make quite a few references to certain plays, and if you are not familiar with them, some things might be hard to understand. But with a quick Google search, the ideas should become clear. I admit I did have to turn to Google to understand a few of your references, but that didn't make the book any less understandable for me. Do you think that college or even high school students should read this book? Or is it really intended for an older audience? I couldn't imagine that it would be totally lost on high school and college-age students, especially if they are going into a field that deals with theater. This is a book that can help to guide them in the right direction. Even students who don't want to study plays could benefit from reading this as well. It tackles creativity in a different way, and that can help expand anyone's mind. I have chosen a few essays that point out some of the life lessons that have no age limit. We would love for you to share them with us. This is essay number 45, on fire alarms. When I was working with my friend and collaborator, Mark Wing Davey, on Passion Play, during our first preview in a church in Brooklyn, a fire alarm went off during Act 3. The audience was evacuated, as were all the actors, dressed in biblical clothes on a windy night. On that night in June, one could see a man dressed in a loincloth on the steps of the Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church in Brooklyn. After some milling around on the steps of the church, when it was clear we would all be outside for a while, the actors decided to go on with the play. First, Mary Magdalene began singing a song about a toll booth from the scene where we'd stopped the play. I thought perhaps we'd just have the song as an interlude, but slowly the audience quieted and gathered round, and somehow, one after another, the actors performed their scenes with no blocking, no props, no nothing, in silent agreement. A stage manager improvised a lighting cue with a flashlight, pretending to be a car. A cross was improvised with 2 actors hoisting up another actor. A sound cue was somehow found on a computer. I kept thinking one of the actors would stop, but in silent agreement, they simply kept doing the play. When boat puppets were called for and a wind machine, the actors pretended to be boats and made the sound of the wind. I thought that once you got your equity card, you refused on principle to ever make the sound of the wind again. But no, these actors made the sound of the wind. Eventually, we were led back into the church and finished the play, but I longed to stay out on the steps of the church. I was so moved that telling the story was more important to them than the fear of exposure. I suppose that's always the playwright's hope, that telling the story outweighs the very fear of total public humiliation. Often there are things for actors to hide behind: costume changes, sound cues, pillars, beautifully painted props, and the like. But on the steps of the Lafayette Church, they had nothing but each other, the audience, and the story. And for half an hour, I was as transfixed as I've ever been, remembering that theater is, at its roots, some very brave people mutually consenting to a make-believe world with nothing but language to rest on. Though this essay talks about a performance of a play, its lesson can also be applied to everyday life. The costume changes and props that actors can hide behind in plays are the words that people hide behind in everyday life. Sometimes, as with actors in this play, there is a silent agreement with people where you all equally depend on each other and work together to get a job done. This is essay number 59. It's beautiful, but I don't like it. Recently, my son said to me after seeing a ballet on television, "It's beautiful, but I don't like it." And I thought, are many grown-ups capable of such a distinction? It's beautiful, but I don't like it? Usually, our grown-up thinking is more along the lines of, I don't like it, so it's not beautiful. What would it mean to separate those two impressions for art making and for art criticism? This essay is a great example of a time when my children taught me more about life than I thought they could. Beauty can always be appreciated, even if it is something that you don't necessarily enjoy. This is essay number 72, Writing and Waiting. I like to look at people's faces when they are waiting. Do they look bored, rude, thoughtful? Do they have a look of forbearance on their faces? The look of forbearance. One sees that look more often on non-American faces or on faces that have waited in line for bread. Forbearance, cousin of dignity, sister of patience. Patience is no longer a virtue in this country, I'm afraid. We've made it into a vice. And I'm worried that the elimination of waiting will make us monstrous. Things we used to wait for, the news, mercury in the thermometer to rise, letters from overseas, boats to come in from whaling expeditions, the fifth act, the fifth course, a turkey to roast in the oven, a pig to roast on a spit, the phone to ring, a tape to rewind, bread to rise, tea to brew, grapes to ferment. And if waiting is lost, then will all the unconscious processes that take place during waiting get lost? And then, might we see the death of the unconscious and the death of culture? Do you remember being a child and waiting for your father to mix paint at the hardware store? Waiting for school to be over, waiting for summer to come, waiting for the curtain to go up, the sweetness of waiting? The waiting of adulthood is perhaps not so sweet. The small degradations of waiting, the pretty horror of waiting, the real terror of waiting in the waiting room, the waiting in hospitals, the waiting for death, which perhaps only forbearance prepares us for. Do all world religions mainly teach us about waiting? Waiting for deliverance, waiting for the coming of the Lord, waiting for the present moment to pass? Because in pure waiting is the diminution of suffering. Does learning to wait forestall violence? Is plot violence? Is the desire for story and more story a kind of narrative violence? I remember seeing a Robert Wilson piece in which a nail almost went into a hand,
over and over very slowly, never getting there. And the violent desire is incited in my breast for the nail to puncture the hand. Can the theater teach us to wait, to forestall our satisfaction? Poems teach us how to wait. The natural world makes us wait. Erik Satie teaches us how to wait, and so does much music. Will YouTube teach us how to wait? Will YouTube teach us how to die?
This essay still leaves me thinking. It teaches me a lesson that the natural world makes us wait, yet we keep pushing to get rid of that waiting. Thank you, Sarah. Those are just some of the wonderful essays in Sarah's book. I hope you enjoyed the show, and don't forget to go out and purchase Sarah's book, 100 Essays I Don't Have Time to Write.